It's a story of survival, hardship, and the human spirit in one of America's most challenging eras. Hey, if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. I'm curious where you're listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, find a cozy spot, take a slow, deep breath, and let your body sink into comfort as we journey back in time together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in Dodge City, Kansas on a sweltering afternoon in July 1875. The first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you smell. The thick, cloying scent of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco, and something that might charitably be called whiskey, but smells more like paint thinner mixed with burnt sugar. Your eyes water slightly as the aroma fills your nostrils and you realize you're standing just outside the canvas flaps of what folks around here call a saloon. The good news is you're about to witness one of the most fascinating and complex social institutions of the American frontier. The bad news? Well, you're about to discover that life in these establishments was nothing like the romantic tales Hollywood would later tell. Let your shoulders relax as we step through those canvas flaps together, because you'll need to stay calm for what comes next. The saloon you're entering is basically a large tent stretched over a wooden frame, with rough pine boards laid across the dusty ground as flooring. The walls are just heavy canvas, and you can hear every conversation, every argument, every cough and spit from the dozens of men crowded inside this stifling space. Your feet sink slightly into the soft dirt that's managed to work its way up between the floorboards, and you can feel the grit between your teeth already. That's just how it is out here, where the wind never stops blowing dust across these endless Kansas plains. The air inside is thick and oppressive, heated by the July sun bearing down on the canvas roof and warmed further by the press of so many unwashed bodies. Take a moment to let your eyes adjust to the dim interior, because there's a lot to take in. Along one side of the tent, someone has constructed what passes for a bar, rough-hewn planks laid across wooden barrels with a few bottles of various shapes and colours arranged behind it. There's no mirror, no polished mahogany, no gleaming brass rail for men to rest their boots on. Just pine boards, sticky with spilled liquor and marked with countless knife cuts and burn scars from cigars. Behind the makeshift bar stands a man you'd guess to be in his 40s, though the hard frontier life makes it difficult to tell. His face is weathered like old leather, with deep lines around his eyes from squinting against the prairie sun. His shirt, once white, is now a dingy grey-yellow, and you notice dark stains under his arms that speak to the challenge of staying clean when water is precious and laundry means hauling everything down to the muddy Arkansas River. He's wiping glasses with a rag that's seen better decades, and as you watch, you realise that same rag is used to wipe the bar, clean up spills, and occasionally mop the sweat from his brow. The concept of sanitation, you quickly understand, is more of a luxury than a necessity in this time and place. When several men share the same glass throughout the evening, and that bar rag serves multiple purposes, germs spread as easily as gossip. Let your breathing slow and deepen as you take in the rest of this fascinating scene. Scattered throughout the tent are rough wooden tables, each one scarred and stained with years of use. Some are simply planks laid across sawhorses, while others are more elaborate affairs. Though elaborate here means they have 4 matching legs and don't wobble too badly when someone pounds a fist on them. At these tables, groups of men cluster around games of chance. There's something almost hypnotic about watching their hands move cards across the scarred wood, the soft whisper of shuffling, the gentle clink of coins and chips. The most popular game, you notice, isn't poker, as you might expect, but something called faro. It's a fast-paced banking game where players bet on which cards will appear, and the dealer, called a banker, operates a specially designed case that dispenses cards one at a time. The men playing faro have a particular intensity about them, a focused silence broken only by quick, muttered bets and the soft sigh of cards being revealed. You can see the appeal. It's simple enough for trail-weary cowboys to understand after a few drinks, but complex enough to keep their interest for hours. More importantly, it's a game where large sums can change hands quickly, which explains why the saloon owner is so eager to host these games and take his percentage of every pot. Feel the weight of the humid air as you notice the other patrons scattered throughout this canvas cathedral of frontier entertainment. There are cowboys, recognizable by their wide-brimmed hats and leather chaps, their faces burnt dark by months under the unforgiving prairie sun. You can see trail dust ground deep into the creases around their eyes and embedded under their fingernails. These men have just finished driving herds of longhorn cattle up from Texas, a journey that took months through every kind of weather you can imagine. Mixed among the cowboys are railroad workers, distinguishable by their blue denim overalls and the coal dust that seems permanently ground into their skin and clothes. They've been laying track across the endless Kansas grassland, backbreaking work that involves hauling heavy steel rails under the blazing sun, driving countless spikes into railroad ties with heavy sledgehammers until their hands are a mass of calluses and their backs ache constantly. There are miners too, men whose clothes carry the grey dust of distant silver claims and whose eyes hold that particular hollow look that comes from spending months underground in narrow, dangerous tunnels. Some are flush with recent discoveries, their pockets heavy with silver coins, while others are clearly down to their last few dollars, nursing a single drink and hoping their luck will change before morning. Allow your mind to settle as you observe the subtle social dynamics playing out in this tent. Despite what you might expect, there's a surprising amount of order here. The saloon owner, you realize, has a vested interest in keeping things relatively peaceful. Violence is bad for business. It scares away customers, breaks furniture that's expensive to replace, and attracts the attention of what little law enforcement exists in this frontier town. Near the back of the tent, you notice movement that catches your eye. There are women here, though not many, and their presence adds another layer of complexity to this social ecosystem. You see a young woman, perhaps 20 years old, moving between the tables with a tray of drinks. Her dress is simple but clean, a practical cotton affair in dark blue that doesn't show stains easily. Her hair is pinned up neatly, and while her face shows the wear of frontier life, she carries herself with a dignity that commands respect from the men around her. This is what they call a saloon girl, though that term covers a wide range of roles and circumstances. Her primary job is to encourage men to buy drinks and stay in the saloon longer, spending more money. She'll dance with customers for 25 cents a song, engage them in conversation, and generally brighten their evening. Contrary to what later movies would suggest, most saloon girls weren't prostitutes. They were entertainers and hostesses, trying to make an honest living in a place where women's opportunities were severely limited. As you watch her work, you begin to understand the delicate balance she must maintain. She needs to be friendly enough to encourage spending, but not so friendly as to create expectations she can't or won't fulfill. She must navigate the often drunken advances of lonely men who haven't seen a woman in months while maintaining her safety and dignity. It's a performance that requires considerable skill, and you notice how she positions herself near other people, never isolated with a single customer, always maintaining escape routes to safer parts of the tent. Let the sounds of this place wash over you like a gentle tide. There's the constant murmur of conversation, punctuated occasionally by bursts of laughter or the sharp exclamation of someone winning or losing at cards. You hear the clink of bottles against glasses, the scrape of chairs on the rough wooden floor, and underneath it all, the soft whistle of prairie wind moving through the canvas walls. Someone in the corner has produced a harmonica and is playing a slow, melancholy tune that speaks of home and loneliness and vast distances travelled. The melody weaves through the other sounds, adding a touch of beauty to this rough environment. Other men hum along softly, and for a moment The entire tent seems united in a shared recognition of how far they all are from anything resembling comfort or familiarity. The music reminds you that these men, despite their rough exterior, are far from home and often profoundly lonely. Many haven't seen their families in months or even years. Some have families back east they're working to support, sending most of their earnings home while living on beans and hardtack. Others are running from something. Debts, failed relationships, legal troubles, or simply the feeling that they didn't fit into the increasingly civilized Eastern society. Notice how your breathing has naturally slowed as you've become absorbed in observing this fascinating social tableau. There's something almost meditative about watching these men at their simple pleasures: cards, conversation, and the occasional sip of whatever passes for whiskey in this frontier establishment. Speaking of whiskey, you're curious about what exactly these men are drinking with such apparent enjoyment. The bottles behind the bar contain a variety of mysterious liquids, and you quickly learn that quality control is, well, let's just say it varies considerably. Much of what's called whiskey is actually rot gut, a concoction of raw grain alcohol mixed with whatever the proprietor has on hand to give it colour and flavour. The recipes are creative, to put it mildly. You might find burnt sugar for colour, chewing tobacco for flavour, and even stranger additions like turpentine, ammonia, or gunpowder. The goal isn't to create something delicious, but rather something strong enough to help men forget their troubles for a few hours. At 25 cents a shot, nearly $5 in today's money, it's not exactly cheap, but for men who've been working brutal jobs for months, it represents a few hours of relief from the hardships of frontier life. The beer is warm, of course, since refrigeration won't reach most of these frontier towns for another decade or more. It's stored at whatever temperature the tent happens to be, which on this July afternoon means it's roughly the same temperature as bath water. But the men don't seem to mind. Cold beer is a luxury they've learned to live without, along with so many other comforts that folks back east take for granted. As evening approaches and the sun begins to sink toward the western horizon, the atmosphere in the tent subtly shifts. The day's heat is finally beginning to ease, and a gentle breeze starts to move through the canvas walls, carrying with it the sense of prairie grass and distant wood smoke. Men who've been nursing single drinks all afternoon begin to order second rounds, and the conversation becomes more animated as the alcohol and the cooling air combine to lift spirits. Feel your body settling deeper into relaxation as you watch the simple ritual of men unwinding after hard days of labour. There's something timeless and somehow comforting about it. The universal human need for companionship, for a place to belong, for a few hours of pleasure after long days of toil. Despite the harsh conditions and rough circumstances, you can see genuine friendship and camaraderie developing among these frontier travellers. The saloon girl continues her graceful dance between tables, her tray somehow always balanced perfectly despite the uneven floor and the occasionally unsteady customer. You notice how the men treat her with a mixture of respect and protective concern. While there are certainly those who try to take liberties, the majority seem to understand that she's working hard to make an honest living and deserves to be treated accordingly. As the sun disappears completely and someone lights a few kerosene lanterns around the tent, the golden light creates dancing shadows on the canvas walls. The harsh edges of the day seem to soften, and even this rough frontier establishment takes on a certain warm intimacy. Men's voices drop to quieter tones, and the harmonica player switches to even gentler melodies that seem designed to ease the soul rather than energize the spirit. You realize you're witnessing something remarkable, a moment of peace and human connection in one of the harshest environments imaginable. These men have found a way to create community and comfort even here in this dusty tent on the edge of civilization. They've established their own codes of conduct, their own forms of entertainment, their own ways of caring for one another. As you prepare to rest and let these images settle in your mind, take a moment to appreciate the resilience of the human spirit. Despite facing challenges that would seem overwhelming to most of us today, isolation, physical hardship, uncertain futures, and very real dangers, these frontier people found ways to create joy, friendship, and meaning in their lives. The gentle sounds of the saloon continue around you as your eyelids grow heavy. The soft murmur of conversation, the whisper of cards being shuffled, the distant notes of that lonely harmonica. Let these sounds carry you toward peaceful sleep, knowing that tomorrow we'll continue exploring this fascinating world where survival required not just physical toughness, but the ability to find humanity and connection in the most unlikely places. As the night deepens and the kerosene lanterns cast their warm, flickering glow across the canvas walls, you begin to notice details that escaped your attention in the bright afternoon light. The saloon girl you've been watching, let's call her Mary, though her real name might be something entirely different, as many women in her position adopted new identities when they came west, moves with a practiced efficiency that speaks of months, perhaps years, of navigating this challenging world. You notice how she never quite turns her back on any customer, always positioning herself where she can see the entire room. Her dress, while clean, shows signs of careful mending. A small patch near the hem where someone's spur caught the fabric, tiny stitches around a tear that might have come from a grabbing hand she had to escape. These aren't just clothes, you realise, they're armour of sorts, designed to be practical, durable, and easily cleaned when the inevitable spills and mishaps occur. The good news is that Mary seems to have earned the respect of the regular customers, who nod politely when she approaches their tables and make room for her to set down their drinks without crowding her. The bad news becomes apparent when you notice how carefully she watches the door, alert for strangers whose intentions and temperament she hasn't yet learned to read. Let your shoulders settle as you observe the delicate dance of frontier hospitality that Mary performs dozens of times each evening. When she approaches a table of cowboys fresh off the trail, she keeps her tone light and friendly, but maintains what you might call a professional distance. "Evening, gentlemen," she might say, her voice carrying just far enough to be heard over the general conversation. "Can I bring you another round, or perhaps something to eat? We've got beans and hardtack, or if you're feeling prosperous, there's bacon to go with it." The cowboys, their faces still bearing the dust and sunburn of weeks on the trail, respond with a mixture of eagerness and awkward politeness that tells you everything about how long it's been since they've had a conversation with a woman. They stumble over their words, suddenly conscious of their rough appearance and rougher language. "Yes, ma'am," one might reply, removing his hat and smoothing his hair with fingers that shake slightly from either nerves or too much rot-gut whiskey. "That sounds real fine, ma'am. Real fine indeed." You begin to understand that Mary's job involves much more than simply serving drinks. She's part entertainer, part therapist, part social director for men who've been isolated from normal human society for months at a time. She listens to stories about home, about families left behind, about dreams of striking it rich and returning east with enough money to buy a farm or start a business. She nods sympathetically when cowboys describe the challenges of the trail. River crossings where they lost cattle, thunderstorms that scattered the herd, the constant worry about Indian raids or rustlers. But you also notice the toll this emotional labour takes on her. Between tables, when she thinks no one is watching, her professional smile fades for just a moment, and you can see the exhaustion in her eyes. She's been on her feet since mid-afternoon, and it's now well past 9 o'clock. Her feet hurt. You can tell by the way she shifts her weight when she stands still for more than a few seconds. The constant need to be charming and attentive, to make every customer feel special and welcome, requires a kind of emotional energy that must be absolutely draining. Take a slow, deep breath as you notice the other women working in this tent saloon, because Mary isn't alone in this challenging profession. Near the back of the tent, partly hidden by shadows, you see an older woman, perhaps 35, which makes her practically elderly by frontier standards. Her name might be Kate, and she's what folks politely call a soiled dove, though you quickly learn that these euphemisms cover a harsh reality. Kate represents the other side of women's work in frontier saloons, the side that proper society prefers not to acknowledge, but that serves a very real need in these overwhelmingly male communities. She's a prostitute, though that word is rarely spoken aloud in polite company. Instead, people refer to sporting women, or ladies of the line, or painted ladies, as if prettier language could somehow soften the harsh realities of her profession. The good news is that Kate appears to be working independently, which gives her more control over her customers and her earnings than women who work for madams in more formal brothels. The bad news is that independence also means she has less protection when things go wrong, and in this business, things go wrong with disturbing frequency. You watch as Kate negotiates with a potential customer, a miner whose clothes are still dusty from his claim. The conversation is conducted in hushed tones, but you can see the careful assessment taking place on both sides. Kate is evaluating whether this man seems safe, sober enough to conduct business properly, and financially capable of paying her fee. The miner, meanwhile, is trying to determine if Kate's prices fit his budget and if she seems healthy enough to risk the encounter. This health question isn't trivial. Sexually transmitted diseases are rampant on the frontier, where medical care is virtually non-existent and prevention methods are primitive at best. Syphilis, in particular, stalks these communities like a silent plague. In the final stages, it attacks the brain, leading to madness and death. Many death certificates of the era list cancer of the brain as the cause of death, but knowledgeable people understand this as a discrete reference to advanced syphilis. Feel your breathing slow as you contemplate the incredible risks these women face simply to survive in this harsh environment. For many, like Kate, prostitution isn't a choice made from a position of strength, but rather the only option available when other means of survival have been exhausted. Some are widows whose husbands died in mining accidents or were killed by Indians. Others were abandoned by men who promised to marry them, leaving them ruined in the eyes of respectable society and unable to find other work. The economics of Kate's situation are brutally simple. She might charge anywhere from $1 to $5 per encounter, depending on the customer's apparent wealth and the level of service requested. That sounds like good money. A cowboy might earn $30 a month, so $5 represents significant purchasing power. But Kate has to split her earnings with the saloon owner, who provides her with a small room in the back of the tent where she can conduct business. She also has to pay for her own food, clothing, and the various tonics and patent medicines she hopes might protect her from disease or prevent unwanted pregnancy. More importantly, Kate's earning potential has a strict expiration date. The combination of hard living, exposure to disease, and the physical toll of her profession means that most women in her situation have only a few years before age, and declining health force them into less lucrative circumstances. The lucky ones might save enough money to retire or marry a customer who's willing to overlook their past. The unlucky ones often end up in what are called cribs, tiny one-room shacks on the outskirts of town where older or less attractive prostitutes serve the poorest customers for whatever they can get. Let your mind settle on the small kindnesses that make life bearable in this harsh environment. You notice that Mary and Kate treat each other with mutual respect and support, despite the social stratification that technically separates saloon girls from prostitutes. When Kate finishes with a customer and emerges looking shaken or upset, Mary finds a moment to check on her quietly, perhaps bringing her a cup of coffee or simply offering a sympathetic word. This solidarity among the women is crucial for survival because the dangers they face are very real. Violence against women is disturbingly common on the frontier, where the usual social constraints that protect women in more civilized areas simply don't exist. Law enforcement is minimal. Dodge City might have one sheriff and a deputy to maintain order over thousands of transient workers and travelers. Courts are rare, and when they do exist, they're often more concerned with property crimes than violence against women, especially women whose virtue is already considered compromised. You witness a small but telling incident when a drunk cowboy becomes too aggressive with Mary, grabbing her arm when she tries to move away from his table. Before she can react, two other customers, men she's apparently served before, stand up and suggest firmly that the cowboy release her and apologize. The tension in the tent spikes for a moment, hands moving instinctively toward weapons, but the drunk cowboy's friends pull him back down to his seat and mumble apologies to Mary. This intervention isn't motivated by chivalry so much as pragmatism. The regular customers understand that the saloon girls are what make this establishment more pleasant than a simple drinking tent, and they have a vested interest in protecting them. A saloon that gets a reputation for allowing its women to be mistreated will find that the women leave for better situations, and customers will follow them to more hospitable establishments. But not all situations resolve so peacefully. You learn through whispered conversations about women who simply disappeared one day, presumably victims of violence they couldn't escape. Others committed suicide when the combined pressures of their situation became unbearable. The frontier newspapers occasionally report these tragedies, though often in veiled language that protects the sensibilities of more respectable readers. Allow the gentle sounds of the evening to wash over you as you notice how the women have developed strategies for staying safe in this dangerous environment. Mary never walks home alone. She's arranged to leave with a group of other workers, or she simply sleeps in the saloon, curled up on a blanket behind the bar where the owner can keep an eye on things. Kate always tells Mary where she's going and when she expects to return, so someone will notice if she doesn't come back. They also maintain what you might call an informal intelligence network, sharing information about which customers are safe and which ones to avoid. A cowboy who got too rough with a woman in one saloon will find that word of his behavior has somehow spread to other establishments, making it difficult for him to find female companionship anywhere in town. This system of shared information is one of the few forms of protection available to women in a society that offers them little legal recourse when things go wrong. The hygiene challenges these women face would be overwhelming by modern standards. Bathing is a luxury that requires hauling water from the river, heating it over a fire, and finding a private space where they won't be disturbed. Most saloon girls manage a full bath perhaps once a week, and daily washing is limited to whatever they can accomplish with a basin of water and a cloth. Laundry is equally challenging. Their dresses must be washed by hand using harsh lye soap that's rough on both fabric and skin. In winter, clothes frozen on the line might take days to dry. In summer, the constant dust means that anything hanging outside gets dirty again before it's fully dry. Clean clothes are a constant struggle, and most women own only 2 or 3 dresses, rotating them as washing and mending permit. Feel your body relaxing as you contemplate the small luxuries that make life bearable in this challenging environment. A new ribbon for her hair represents a significant investment for Mary, but it helps her maintain the appearance of femininity that's essential to her work. A small bottle of rose water, carefully hoarded and used sparingly, can mask the inevitable odours of frontier life for special occasions. These tiny touches of beauty and refinement become incredibly precious when everything else about life is harsh and utilitarian. The food available to saloon workers is monotonous and often nutritionally inadequate. Meals typically consist of beans, hardtack, and occasionally salt pork or bacon when someone's feeling prosperous. Fresh vegetables are rare and expensive, leading to scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies. Fresh meat is available when someone shoots game, but preservation is challenging without refrigeration, so most protein comes from salted or dried sources. Mary has learned to supplement this basic diet whenever possible. She might trade her services for fresh eggs from a customer who's passing through with a wagon train. She knows which wild plants growing along the river are edible and can add some variety to the endless beans and bread. She saves every penny she can spare to buy small luxuries like coffee or sugar, which can make the difference between a merely filling meal and one that provides some actual pleasure. Water, surprisingly, is often more dangerous than the rot-gut whiskey. The Arkansas River that flows near Dodge City also serves as a dumping ground for all the waste produced by the growing town. Human waste, dead animals, garbage, and runoff from various businesses all contaminate the water supply. Many frontier residents actually consider alcohol safer to drink than water, since the alcohol content kills some of the harmful bacteria that flourish in contaminated water sources. This means that Mary and Kate, like most frontier residents, exist in a constant state of mild dehydration and low-level alcohol consumption. They've learned to pace themselves, drinking just enough to avoid waterborne illness without becoming intoxicated and vulnerable to the dangers that surround them. Let the soft sounds of the settling evening carry you toward peaceful rest as you notice how these remarkable women have created small rituals of comfort and normalcy in their challenging lives. Before the saloon closes each night, Mary takes a few minutes to tidy her appearance, smoothing her hair and straightening her dress. It's a small act of self-respect and dignity that helps her maintain her sense of identity despite the harsh circumstances. Kate, too, has her rituals. After her last customer of the evening, she carefully counts her earnings and sets aside a portion for savings, no matter how small. Even if it's just a few pennies, this act of planning for the future helps her maintain hope that her current situation isn't permanent, that she's working towards something better. The two women often share a cup of coffee before retiring, sitting quietly in the back of the tent as the last customers finish their games and conversation. They don't talk much during these moments. They're both exhausted from the emotional and physical demands of their work. But there's comfort in shared silence, in the simple presence of another woman who understands the unique challenges they face. As the kerosene lanterns begin to burn low and the tent gradually empties of customers, you can feel the day's tension slowly ebbing away. The harsh realities of frontier life remain, but for this moment there's peace. Mary and Kate have survived another day, earned enough money to eat tomorrow, and avoided the worst of the dangers that constantly threaten their safety and well-being. The gentle sounds of the Kansas night begin to filter through the canvas walls, the distant lowing of cattle in the holding pens outside town, the soft whisper of prairie wind through the grass, the occasional call of a night bird. These natural sounds provide a soothing counterpoint to the human dramas that play out within the tent, reminding you that beyond this small island of civilization, the vast frontier continues under the same stars that have watched over countless generations of human struggle and survival. Close your eyes and let these peaceful sounds carry you toward rest, knowing that tomorrow we'll continue exploring this fascinating world where ordinary people found extraordinary ways to create meaning, community, and hope in one of the most challenging environments imaginable. The morning sun rises over Dodge City like a hammer striking an anvil, bringing with it the promise of another day where fortunes can be won or lost in the space between one heartbeat and the next. You wake to find yourself still in that canvas tent saloon, but now the scene is entirely different from the relatively peaceful evening you witnessed before. The air is thick with tension that you can almost taste, sharp and metallic like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. At the faro table in the centre of the tent, a game has been running continuously since yesterday afternoon, and the men clustered around it have the hollow-eyed, desperate look of people who've pushed far beyond the point of rational decision-making. Take a slow, steady breath as you observe this fascinating and dangerous theatre of human behaviour. Faro, you quickly learn, is a game that can destroy a man's life in minutes. Unlike poker, which requires skill and psychology, Faro is essentially a betting game where players wager on which cards will appear from the dealer's specially designed case. It's fast, it's simple to understand even when you're drunk, and it can consume vast sums of money with terrifying speed. The good news is that Faro is considered an honest game when run properly. The odds are clearly defined, and there's less opportunity for the kind of creative cheating that plagues poker games. The bad news is that those clearly defined odds heavily favour the house, meaning that over time, the saloon owner will inevitably collect most of the money wagered at his tables. But it's not the mathematics of the game that creates the electric tension in the air this morning. It's the accusation of cheating that's been hanging over the table like a storm cloud for the past hour. A young cowboy named Jake, his face flushed with alcohol and desperation, has been steadily losing his trail wages to what appears to be an impossibly unlucky streak. His initial stake of $30, a full month's pay, has dwindled to less than $5, and his bets have become increasingly erratic as panic sets in. You can see the exact moment when Jake's fraying nerves finally snap. "That case is crooked," he shouts, pointing an accusing finger at the ornate wooden box from which the dealer has been dispensing cards. "Ain't no way I can lose 17 hands in a row, honest." The silence that follows this accusation is so complete you can hear the distant whistle of wind through the prairie grass outside. Every conversation in the tent stops. Every man turns to watch what happens next, because everyone understands that accusations of cheating in frontier gambling establishments tend to be resolved with violence. Let your shoulders relax even as you feel the tension building, because you're about to witness how frontier justice operates when formal law enforcement is hundreds of miles away. The dealer, a thin man with prematurely grey hair and steady hands, doesn't immediately respond to Jake's accusation. Instead, he carefully sets down the cards he's holding and looks around the table at the other players. "Gentlemen," he says quietly, his voice carrying easily in the sudden silence, "I've been running honest games in frontier towns for 15 years. My reputation is the only thing that lets me make a living, and I don't risk it for any man's money, no matter how much he's willing to lose." This is the moment when things could go very wrong very quickly. Jake's hand is already moving toward the Colt revolver on his hip, and you can see other men subtly positioning themselves to dive for cover if shooting starts. In a world where every man is armed and formal, justice is weeks away by horseback. Accusations of cheating are often settled with what frontier residents grimly call lead therapy. But something interesting happens instead. An older cowboy, grey-bearded and weathered by decades of trail life, stands up slowly from his position at the edge of the crowd. "Son," he says to Jake, his voice carrying the authority of experience, "I've been watching this game since yesterday, and I ain't seen nothing crooked. Sometimes the cards just run against a man. That's the nature of gambling." The older cowboy's intervention gives Jake a face-saving way to back down from a confrontation he probably can't win. More importantly, it prevents the kind of violence that could shut down the saloon and disrupt everyone's entertainment. After a long moment of tension, Jake slowly removes his hand from his weapon and nods reluctantly. "Maybe you're right," he admits, though you can see it costs him considerable pride to make this concession. "Maybe the cards just ain't been kind to me today." Feel your breathing return to a more natural rhythm as you witness this small miracle of frontier diplomacy. Violence has been averted, at least for now, but Jake's problems are far from over. He's lost nearly a month's wages, money he was probably planning to send home to family back east, or use to buy supplies for the next cattle drive. His immediate options are all unpleasant. He can try to borrow money from friends, attempt to find work around town until the next drive, or simply go hungry until better opportunities present themselves. This is the brutal mathematics of frontier gambling that plays out dozens of times each day in saloons across the American West. For every man who wins enough to buy a small ranch or start a business, there are dozens who lose everything they've worked months to earn. The dream of striking it rich through gambling is powerful and seductive, but the reality is that most players leave poorer than they arrived. The psychological appeal of gambling in this environment goes beyond simple greed, though. For men who spend months engaged in back-breaking labour under dangerous conditions, the idea that luck rather than hard work might determine their fate has an almost irresistible attraction. A cowboy who spent weeks dodging stampeding cattle and sleeping on the hard ground under thunderstorms can easily convince himself that he's earned a lucky break, that the universe owes him something better than another month of beans and hardtack. Allow your mind to settle as you notice the other forms of entertainment available in this frontier establishment, because gambling is just one way that saloon patrons try to escape the harsh realities of their daily lives. Near the back of the tent, someone has set up a crude but functional billiards table. Rough wooden boards covered with what was once green felt, now faded and stained by months of use. The game being played isn't quite the billiards you might recognise from modern pool halls. The equipment is improvised and the rules are flexible, adapted to accommodate the limitations of frontier craftsmanship. The cue sticks are hand-carved from whatever wood was available, and the balls are mismatched spheres of various materials, some carved from wood, others made from clay, a few actual ivory balls that someone probably carried west from a more civilized establishment. But despite the primitive equipment, the players demonstrate considerable skill and take their games quite seriously. Small wagers ride on each shot, and the competition is fierce enough to draw crowds of spectators who offer commentary and encouragement with the enthusiasm of modern sports fans. You also notice dice games scattered throughout the tent, ranging from simple chuck-a-luck wheels to more complex betting arrangements that involve multiple dice and mathematical calculations that would challenge a sober man, let alone someone who's been drinking rot-gut whiskey for several hours. These games tend to attract the smaller bettors, men who can't afford the high stakes of the faro table but still want to try their luck against fortune. Take a moment to observe the drinking habits that fuel this culture of gambling and risk-taking, because the connection between alcohol and poor decision-making is as strong on the frontier as anywhere else. The bottles behind the bar contain substances that would horrify modern drinkers, concoctions designed more for maximum intoxicating effect than palatability or safety. The whiskey that Jake has been consuming throughout his disastrous gambling session is typical of frontier establishments, a mixture of raw grain alcohol, burnt sugar for colour, and various additives intended to provide flavour and kick. The bartender might add pepper for heat, tobacco for a woody taste, or even small amounts of strychnine, which in tiny doses acts as a stimulant but in larger quantities becomes deadly poison. The goal isn't to create a smooth, enjoyable drinking experience, but rather to produce something strong enough to provide immediate and powerful intoxication. Men who've been working 16-hour days in brutal conditions want their few hours of recreation to be intense and memorable, even if the memories are somewhat blurry the next morning. Beer, when available, is equally challenging by modern standards. Without refrigeration, it's served at ambient temperature, which in a Kansas summer means roughly the same temperature as a warm bath. The brewing process is often improvised, using whatever ingredients are available locally, and quality control is essentially non-existent. Some frontier beer is reasonably palatable, while other batches might be sour, bitter, or contaminated with bacteria that can cause serious illness. Let your body relax as you notice how the saloon patrons have learned to pace their consumption, because survival on the frontier requires maintaining at least some level of alertness and judgment even during recreational drinking. Total intoxication is a luxury that few can afford when violence, accidents, or other emergencies might arise at any moment. Most experienced drinkers nurse their whiskey slowly, making a single shot last for an hour or more while they engage in conversation or games. They've learned through hard experience that getting too drunk too quickly can lead to disastrous decisions, gambling away money they can't afford to lose, picking fights with men they can't beat, or simply becoming vulnerable to robbery or assault. The physical effects of frontier drinking extend beyond simple intoxication. The harsh additives in rot-gut whiskey can cause severe stomach problems, and many regular drinkers develop chronic digestive issues that plague them for years. The combination of poor nutrition, contaminated water, and toxic alcohol creates a perfect storm of health problems that significantly shorten lifespans throughout the frontier region. You witness the medical realities of frontier life when a commotion near the tent entrance draws your attention to a man stumbling inside with blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. He's obviously been in a fight, and his unsteady gait suggests he's been drinking heavily before whatever altercation caused his injury. The good news is that frontier communities have developed practical approaches to dealing with common injuries and medical emergencies. The bad news is that these approaches would be considered primitive and dangerous by any modern medical standard. The saloon owner, acting as the closest thing to a medical authority available, examines the wound with hands that haven't been washed since morning. He determines that the cut, while bloody, isn't deep enough to be life-threatening. His treatment consists of pouring whiskey over the wound, both to clean it and to provide pain relief, and then binding it with a strip of fabric torn from what might charitably be called a clean shirt. This represents the state of medical care available to most frontier residents. There are no doctors within hundreds of miles, no hospitals, no antiseptics beyond alcohol, and no pain relievers beyond whiskey, and perhaps some laudanum if someone's wealthy enough to afford it. Serious injuries or illnesses are often death sentences, and even minor problems can become life-threatening if infection sets in. The injured man accepts his crude treatment stoically, understanding that it's the best care available. He'll probably develop a nasty scar, and there's a significant risk of infection that could turn a simple cut into a serious medical emergency. But he's alive, he's mobile, and with luck, he'll heal well enough to continue working and surviving in this harsh environment. Feel your breathing slow as you contemplate the incredible resilience required to survive in a world where a simple accident or illness can quickly become catastrophic. Frontier residents develop a fatalistic attitude toward injury and death that might seem callous to modern sensibilities, but it's actually a necessary psychological adaptation to an environment where danger is constant and help is rarely available. The psychological toll of living with constant risk manifests in various ways throughout the saloon. You notice men with the telltale hand tremor of chronic alcoholism, their nervous systems damaged by years of consuming toxic substances. Others show signs of what would now be recognized as post-traumatic stress, the hollow stare of men who've witnessed too much violence, the jumpiness of people who've learned to expect danger at any moment. Many saloon patrons suffer from what frontier residents call prairie madness, a form of depression and anxiety caused by the isolation, hardship, and uncertainty of frontier life. The vast emptiness of the Western landscape can be psychologically overwhelming, especially for people accustomed to the more populated and structured environment of Eastern communities. The saloon serves as an antidote to this psychological isolation, providing human contact and distraction from the mental health challenges that plague frontier communities. Men who might otherwise succumb to despair find reasons to continue living in the camaraderie and entertainment available in these establishments. As the day progresses and the heat inside the tent becomes increasingly oppressive, you notice how the physical environment affects everyone's mood and behavior. The temperature under the canvas roof climbs well above 100 degrees, and the humidity from dozens of sweating bodies makes the air thick and difficult to breathe. Men remove their shirts and roll up their sleeves, revealing bodies marked by the hard labour of frontier life. You see scars from accidents with tools and livestock, burn marks from campfires and branding irons, and the deep tan lines that come from working outdoors in all weather. These are bodies shaped by physical work, lean and tough, but often bearing the accumulated damage of a lifetime of hard use. The women working in the saloon face additional challenges in this oppressive heat. Their long dresses and multiple layers of undergarments trap body heat, and the need to maintain a feminine appearance prevents them from removing clothing for comfort the way men can. You see Mary and Kate frequently wiping sweat from their faces and necks, and notice how they position themselves near the tent openings whenever possible to catch any available breeze. Some say it's punishment for his wars against the Goths in Italy and North Africa, for his pride in building the magnificent church, for the excesses of his beautiful but scheming wife, Empress Theodora. Others whisper of stranger things, of fiery rocks falling from the sky beyond the northern forests, of mountains across the sea that spewed fire and smoke into the heavens, blackening the sun. A merchant passing through claims that in the Far East, in the land of the Chin, it snowed in summer, and people are eating the bark from trees. Your village's food stores are nearly gone by the time true spring should be bringing fresh growth. A family from the next village is caught stealing grain from your communal storage, and Titus faces the grim choice of punishment. In the end, he gives them a small portion, enough for a few days, and sends them away with a warning not to return. "We cannot save everyone," he says heavily. "We can barely save ourselves." As the second planting season under the darkened sky approaches, a new worry emerges. With food so scarce, some farmers have eaten their seed grain, leaving nothing to plant for the next harvest. Your village has managed to preserve just enough, though it means even tighter belts for now. Little Livia has grown thin, her once round cheeks now hollow. Lucius tries to be brave, but you've seen him crying silently when he thinks no one is watching. Your mother's health is failing. She coughs constantly and can barely rise from her pallet some days. Even Marcus, always strong, has lost the robust energy that once defined him. One night, as a rare, clear sky reveals stars above your darkened world, Marcus sits beside you outside your hut. "We will survive this," he says quietly. "We come from strong stock, you and I. Our ancestors endured the fall of Rome, the coming of the Huns. We will endure this darkness too." You lean against his shoulder, drawing strength from his certainty, even if you suspect it's partly for show. "And if we don't?" you ask. He's silent for a long moment, his eyes on the stars. "Then we will have lived with courage and kindness until the end. What more could God ask of anyone?" It's small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The next day brings something unexpected. A stranger on the road, a man in the simple robes of a Christian monk. He's travelling from monastery to monastery, he explains, carrying messages and news. Father Paulus welcomes him, and that evening the villagers gather to hear what word he brings from the wider world. "The darkness lies over all the lands I have travelled," the monk tells you, his voice carrying in the hushed church. "From Britannia to Palestine, the sun is dim and people suffer, but there are places where the suffering is less." He speaks of the great estates of wealthy landowners where stored grain from years of abundance is helping people survive. He talks of fishing villages along the Mediterranean where, although the weather is strange, the sea still yields its harvest. And he tells of monasteries where careful management and charity are saving many lives. The emperor himself has opened the imperial granaries, the monk says. In Constantinople, bread is being distributed to the hungry. Not enough for all, but many are saved who would otherwise perish. This news brings both hope and frustration. Help exists, but it is far away, beyond reach for simple villagers like you. The monk stays only one night before continuing his journey, but before he leaves, he gives Father Paulus a precious gift, a small pouch of dried herbs. "Medicinal herbs from our monastery gardens," he explains, "for fever and cough. Use them sparingly. They may save lives before this trial ends." You think immediately of your mother, wondering if these herbs might ease her suffering. As the monk disappears down the road, you stand watching until he's out of sight, feeling strangely bereft, as if a connection to the wider world has been severed once again. That night you dream of the sun, bright, warm and full, hanging in a clear blue sky. In your dream, the fields are golden with healthy grain, the fruit trees heavy with ripe bounty, and your children's faces are round and flushed with health. You wake with tears on your cheeks, the dream so vivid that the dim reality of morning seems even harsher by comparison. Marcus touches your face gently. "What is it?" "I dreamed of the sun," you tell him, "the real sun as it used to be. A good omen," he decides, nodding firmly. "Perhaps things will change soon." And surprisingly, he's right. 3 days later, you step outside in the morning and notice something different. The dim light seems just a fraction brighter than before. You almost don't trust your eyes, fearing it's wishful thinking after your dream. But others notice too. "The sky," Helena says when she sees you at the well. "It's changing, isn't it?" Over the next few weeks, the change becomes undeniable. The sun is still not as bright as it once was, but the oppressive darkness is gradually lifting. The sickly blue cast to the light fades, replaced by something closer to normal daylight, albeit weaker. With the increasing light comes a slight warming, not enough to make up for the lost growing time, but enough to accelerate what growth there is in the fields. The stunted wheat and barley begin to mature, though the heads remain smaller than in normal years. Hope flickers in the village like a fragile flame, easily extinguished by doubt but carefully tended nonetheless. People dare to plan beyond the next day, the next week. There's talk of what to do if, when, the darkness fully lifts. But your family has been weakened by months of insufficient food. Your mother's cough worsens despite the monk's herbs. Little Livia develops a fever that leaves her listless and barely eating, and just as the light begins to return to the world, a new shadow falls over your household. One morning, Marcus can't rise from his pallet. His skin burns with fever, and angry red swellings have appeared at his neck and under his arms. You've heard whispers of a strange illness spreading from Egypt, following the old trade routes north, an illness that begins with fever and swellings, and often ends in death. As you place a cool cloth on your husband's forehead, terror grips your heart. The darkness in the sky might be lifting, but a different kind of darkness now threatens to engulf your world. "Don't worry," Marcus whispers, his voice cracked and dry. "I'm strong. I'll fight this." You nod, unable to speak past the knot in your throat, and reach for his hand. Whatever comes next, you'll face it together, just as you faced the darkness of the dimmed sun. But as you look at his fever-bright eyes, you can't help wondering if the worst of your trials is still to come. The fading light of evening makes the interior of your hut even darker than usual. Outside, you can hear the village settling down for the night. A dog barking in the distance, the lowing of the few remaining cattle, the murmur of voices as neighbours exchange quiet words of encouragement or concern. Inside, there is only the sound of Marcus's laboured breathing and little Livia's occasional whimper as she tosses in feverish sleep. You look around at your family, all suffering, all dependent on your strength, and for a moment despair threatens to overwhelm you. But then you remember Marcus's words. We will have lived with courage and kindness until the end. Taking a deep breath, you add another small piece of precious firewood to the hearth. The flames leap up, casting a warm glow that pushes back the shadows, if only for a moment. It's enough. For now, it has to be enough. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own small victories or defeats, but for tonight your family is together and there is still hope that the sun will continue to brighten, that the fever will break, that life will find a way forward even in the darkest of times. After all, humans are remarkably resilient creatures. Throughout history, we have faced countless disasters, plagues, wars, famines, and natural catastrophes. Yet somehow we endure, we adapt, we survive. And as you settle beside your family in the gathering darkness, you hold fast to that simple truth. No darkness, whether in the sky or in human events, lasts forever. The sun always returns, even if it takes longer than anyone expected. The question is only whether you'll still be here to see it when it does. The days blur together as you tend to your sick family. Marcus's fever burns relentlessly, and the angry red swellings, buboes, Father Paulus calls them, grow larger and more painful. You've tried everything: cool cloths, the monk's herbs steeped in boiled water, prayers whispered through the night. Some mornings, you find hope in a momentary clarity in Marcus's eyes. Other days, his delirium terrifies you as he mutters about darkness and flames. Your mother has taken over caring for Livia, despite her own weakness. The little girl's fever isn't accompanied by the dreaded swellings, which gives you hope that it's a different, less deadly illness. Lucius remains healthy, though his eyes have grown old beyond his years, as he watches his father fight for life. Will father die? He asks you one evening as you both sit outside the hut, taking a brief respite from the sick room. You consider lying to him, offering false comfort, but something in his steady gaze tells you he deserves the truth, or at least as much of it as you understand yourself. I don't know, you admit, putting an arm around his thin shoulders. The illness that grips him is dangerous, but your father is strong and stubborn, and he has much to live for. Lucius nods, his face solemn. I've been praying to St. Luke the physician, he tells you. Father Paulus says he's the patron of doctors. You press a kiss to his forehead, heart swelling with love for this boy who's being forced to grow up too quickly. That's good. We need all the help we can get. On the 7th day of Marcus's illness, the crisis comes. His fever spikes so high that his skin feels like fire beneath your touch. He thrashes on the pallet, alternating between incoherent mumbling and cries of pain when the movement jostles his swollen lymph nodes. You send Lucius to fetch Father Paulus, fearing the worst is upon you. The priest comes quickly, his worn woolen robe flapping around his ankles as he hurries across the village. He carries his precious vial of holy oil for the last rites, and your heart constricts at the sight of it. Not yet, you think desperately. Not like this. Father Paulus examines Marcus with gentle hands that belie his advanced age. The swellings, he murmurs, they seem softer. Has he been able to sleep at all? A little, you say, when the pain eases enough. The priest nods thoughtfully. It's possible, he begins, then stops himself. I don't want to give false hope, but I've seen a few recover from this pestilence. Not many, but some. Usually, it happens when the buboes soften and rupture, releasing the poison within. You glance at the largest swelling on Marcus's neck, noticing for the first time that it does indeed look different, less taut, its angry redness fading to a purplish hue. What should I do? Keep him comfortable, continue with the herbs, and pray. Father Paulus takes your hand. Shall I administer the last rites, just in case? You hesitate, torn between pragmatism and superstition. Some say receiving the last rites while conscious can hasten death, as if the soul, once prepared, is too eager to depart. But Marcus is too far gone in fever to be aware, and you cannot bear the thought of him dying unshriven. Yes, you decide. Please. The ritual is brief but solemn, the Latin words flowing like water over the sick room. Father Paulus anoints Marcus's forehead and hands with the holy oil, murmuring blessings and absolution. When it's done, you feel a strange mix of dread and peace, as if a door has been both opened and closed. That night, as you sit vigil beside Marcus, you notice his breathing has changed. Where before it was rapid and shallow, now it comes more slowly, with greater depth. The skin beneath your hand seems cooler, and then, as the first grey light of dawn filters through the window, the largest bubo on his neck ruptures, releasing a foul-smelling discharge that you hurry to clean away with cloths. Marcus's eyes flutter open. Hey, tonight we're diving into one of the most terrifying moments in human history. Imagine waking up one day to find the sun has gone dark, the crops are failing, and no one knows why. That's exactly what happened in the year 536 AD, what some historians have called the worst year to be alive in human history. But before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 536 AD. The gentle morning light that should be streaming through the tiny window of your one-room wooden hut isn't there. Instead, a strange, dim, bluish glow hangs in the air, as if the sun itself has decided to hide behind a veil. You rub your eyes, thinking perhaps it's just dawn and the full light of day will come soon. But it doesn't. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not for the next 18 months. Your name is Adela, and you live in a small village nestled in the rolling hills not far from the old Roman road that leads to Constantinople, the magnificent capital of the Byzantine Empire. You're part of the vast population of peasant farmers who form the backbone of Emperor Justinian's realm. Your life has never been easy, but it's had its rhythms and certainties until now. Your hut sits among 24 others in a village clearing. The walls are made of wattle and daub, a lattice of wooden strips smeared with a mixture of clay, sand and straw. It's a simple technique that's been used for centuries. Your thatched roof keeps out most of the rain, though during heavy storms, little rivulets sometimes find their way down the interior walls. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth covered with fresh straw that you change every few weeks when it gets too soiled. The air inside is always a bit smoky from the central hearth where you cook your meals and keep warm during the colder months. There are no chimneys in homes like yours. The smoke simply rises and filters out through the thatch or the single window opening that can be covered with an oiled cloth when the weather turns foul. Your home is sparsely furnished. A low wooden table, a few stools, a chest for your meagre possessions, and sleeping pallets stuffed with straw. In one corner, your most valuable possession, an iron cooking pot hanging from a tripod over the fire pit. It's been passed down through generations, and without it, preparing meals would be nearly impossible. You share this simple space with your husband, Marcus, and your 2 children, Lucius, who's 10, and little Livia, who's just turned 6. Your elderly mother also lives with you, her gnarled hands still capable of spinning wool and tending to Livia while you work the fields. On this strange, dim morning, you rise and move to the doorway, pushing aside the rough cloth that serves as your door. Outside, your neighbours are also emerging from their homes, faces upturned to the eerie sky, expressions ranging from confusion to fear. "The sun," whispers Helena, the weaver who lives in the hut next to yours. "It's as pale as a winter moon." You nod, a knot of worry forming in your stomach. Your family, like everyone else in the village, depends on the sun, for light, for warmth, but most importantly for growing the crops that sustain you. Without strong sunlight, the barley and wheat in the fields will struggle, and without a good harvest, winter will bring hunger. "Maybe it's just for today," you say, trying to sound more confident than you feel. Perhaps it's smoke from a distant forest fire. But it isn't just for today. The next morning dawns with the same unnatural twilight, and the next after that. Within a week, a palpable sense of dread has settled over the village like the fine ash that sometimes dusts the ground when you wake. No one knows what's happening, but the older folk mutter about the end of days and signs from God. The good news is that you have stores from last year's harvest, sacks of grain carefully protected from rats and weevils, dried beans and preserves made from autumn fruits. You're luckier than some. The bad news is that those stores were meant to supplement this year's crops, not replace them entirely. As the weeks pass, the crops in the fields grow slowly, if at all. The barley and wheat that should be stretching toward the sky by early summer remain stunted. The vegetables in your garden plot, the cabbages, onions and turnips that usually provide welcome variety to your family's diet, are yellowish and small. Marcus returns from checking the fields one day, his face grim. The ears are forming, but they're thin, he tells you. If the sun doesn't return soon, we'll have less than half our usual yield. But the sun doesn't return to its full strength. Instead, a strange cold settles in, even though it's supposed to be summer. Frost appears on the ground some mornings, something you've never seen in June before. The fruit trees that had blossomed before the darkness came now drop their immature fruit. Small, hard knobs that will never ripen. In the village, the mood grows tense. The headman, Titus, calls a meeting in the small wooden church at the centre of the settlement. Everyone attends, their faces gaunt with worry in the light of the tallow candles. "We must prepare," Titus says simply. "The harvest will be poor. We must conserve what we have and think ahead to winter." Father Paulus, the village priest, raises his hands. "We must also pray," he adds. "God has sent us this trial, and only through prayer and penance can we hope for his mercy." That night, as you lie on your pallet beside Marcus, you whisper in the darkness, "What if the sun never comes back?" His hand finds yours beneath the rough woolen blanket. "It will," he says, but you can hear the doubt in his voice. "It must." The days blur into weeks, and the weeks into months. Summer passes without ever truly arriving, the usual heat replaced by an unseasonable chill. Autumn comes, and with it the meagre harvest. As predicted, the yield is less than half what it should be. The grain is saved for seed and basic sustenance, with little left over for brewing ale or baking anything beyond the simple daily bread. Winter arrives early, with bitter winds and heavy snow. In normal times, winter is difficult but manageable. The cold months when families huddle indoors, mending tools and clothing, telling stories by firelight, waiting for spring. But this winter feels different, more threatening, as if it might never release its grip on the world. Your family eats less to stretch the supplies, but still the storage containers empty faster than they should. Little Livia cries from hunger sometimes, and your mother gives her portions from her own meagre share. You forage in the frozen woods for anything edible. Nuts missed by the squirrels, hardy winter berries, even tree bark that can be ground into flour in desperate times. By midwinter, the first deaths come. Old Cato, who lived alone at the edge of the village, is found frozen in his bed. Then the twins in the blacksmith's family, not yet 2 years old, succumb to a cough that their weakened bodies can't fight off. The ground is too frozen to bury them properly, so the bodies are stored in a cold outbuilding until spring thaw. That's when the wolves come. Normally shy of human settlements, they grow bold with hunger, venturing into the village at night. You wake to their howls and pull Lucius and Livia closer, your heart pounding. Marcus and the other men take turns standing watch, but it doesn't help when 3 of Decius the herder's sheep disappear in one night, leaving only bloodstains in the snow. "We should leave," Helena suggests one day as you both break the ice on the well. "Go south, where it must be warmer, where the crops might still grow." But you shake your head. And go where? The roads are dangerous even in good times. And if it's the end of days, as Father Paulus says, where could we go that God would not find us? Helena has no answer for that. Spring should bring relief, but when it arrives, the sun remains dim, the air cold. The seeds you plant, precious seeds that could have been eaten but were saved for this purpose, struggle to germinate in the chilled soil. People grow desperate. You've heard rumours from travellers on the old Roman road. They say it's the same everywhere, from Gaul to Persia. The sun is dim, the crops are failing, and people are hungry. In Constantinople, even the emperor is concerned, ordering special prayers in the great church of Hagia Sophia. Some say it's punishment for his wars against the Goths in Italy and North Africa, for his pride in building the magnificent church, for the excesses of his beautiful but scheming wife, Empress Theodora. Others whisper of stranger things, of fiery rocks falling from the sky beyond the northern forests, of mountains across the sea that spewed fire and smoke into the heavens, blackening the sun. A merchant passing through claims that in the Far East, in the land of the Chin, it snowed in summer, and people are eating the bark from trees. Your village's food stores are nearly gone by the time true spring should be bringing fresh growth. A family from the next village is caught stealing grain from your communal storage, and Titus faces the grim choice of punishment. In the end, he gives them a small portion, enough for a few days, and sends them away with a warning not to return. "We cannot save everyone," he says heavily. "We can barely save ourselves." As the second planting season under the darkened sky approaches, a new worry emerges. With food so scarce, some farmers have eaten their seed grain, leaving nothing to plant for the next harvest. Your village has managed to preserve just enough, though it means even tighter belts for now. Little Livia has grown thin, her once round cheeks now hollow. Lucius tries to be brave, but you've seen him crying silently when he thinks no one is watching. Your mother's health is failing. She coughs constantly and can barely rise from her pallet some days. Even Marcus, always strong, has lost the robust energy that once defined him. One night, as a rare, clear sky reveals stars above your darkened world, Marcus sits beside you outside your hut. "We will survive this," he says quietly. "We come from strong stock, you and I. Our ancestors endured the fall of Rome, the coming of the Huns. We will endure this darkness too." You lean against his shoulder, drawing strength from his certainty, even if you suspect it's partly for show. "And if we don't?" you ask. He's silent for a long moment, his eyes on the stars. Then we will have lived with courage and kindness until the end. What more could God ask of anyone? It's small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The next day brings something unexpected. A stranger on the road, a man in the simple robes of a Christian monk. He's travelling from monastery to monastery, he explains, carrying messages and news. Father Paulus welcomes him, and that evening the villagers gather to hear what word he brings from the wider world. The darkness lies over all the lands I have travelled, the monk tells you, his voice carrying in the hushed church. From Britannia to Palestine, the sun is dim and people suffer, but there are places where the suffering is less. He speaks of the great estates of wealthy landowners where stored grain from years of abundance is helping people survive. He talks of fishing villages along the Mediterranean where, although the weather is strange, the sea still yields its harvest. And he tells of monasteries where careful management and charity are saving many lives. The emperor himself has opened the imperial granaries, the monk says. In Constantinople, bread is being distributed to the hungry. Not enough for all, but many are saved who would otherwise perish. This news brings both hope and frustration. Help exists, but it is far away, beyond reach for simple villagers like you. The monk stays only one night before continuing his journey, but before he leaves, he gives Father Paulus a precious gift, a small pouch of dried herbs. Medicinal herbs from our monastery gardens, he explains, for fever and cough. Use them sparingly. They may save lives before this trial ends. You think immediately of your mother, wondering if these herbs might ease her suffering. As the monk disappears down the road, you stand watching until he's out of sight, feeling strangely bereft, as if a connection to the wider world has been severed once again. That night you dream of the sun, bright, warm and full, hanging in a clear blue sky. In your dream, the fields are golden with healthy grain, the fruit trees heavy with ripe bounty, and your children's faces are round and flushed with health. You wake with tears on your cheeks, the dream so vivid that the dim reality of morning seems even harsher by comparison. Marcus touches your face gently. What is it? I dreamed of the sun, you tell him, the real sun as it used to be. A good omen, he decides, nodding firmly. Perhaps things will change soon. And surprisingly, he's right. 3 days later, you step outside in the morning and notice something different. The dim light seems just a fraction brighter than before. You almost don't trust your eyes, fearing it's wishful